what I'd like to do today is give you as much time for questions as possible, and so these are my opening remarks. How's that?
I think the most important thing is why we're here. The Senate, we passed a budget with an 80% approval rate. It's sustainable for 4 years. There's no taxes, and a super majority of the additional spending goes to education, higher ed, early learning. So it achieved our goals with 80% approval, and I'll leave it to questions as well.
So the Senate's not on the floor yet. What are you guys working on right now? What's the delay to getting on the floor, and what's coming up today?
Well, that's last night we ran out of bills that we had caucused on. We'd gone through the book. We went to rules last night. Every member pulled 2 bills out of rules. Paperwork had to be printed. We caucused, and I think we're pretty well through that book. Saw the minority party come out of their caucus room. I'm sure they probably had a lot of caucus on those bills. That we're ready to go out and work House bills aggressively this afternoon.
What bills? What do those include?
A little bit of everything. I think there's a mixture of bills from all sorts of committees. We've pretty well got the NTIBs done, so lots of bills.
Is your medical marijuana bill?
No, that's truly a bicameral, bipartisan effort. So we've been meeting all along. What we're hoping is to perfect it in the Senate so that when it comes over to the House, they're able to vote on it and get it right to the governor.
Is there still discussion about taking the tax piece out of it? That was considered in committee, but then it ultimately didn't happen.
Right. We are going to send it over to the House as is.
How it came
out with the finance piece in it, with the fiscal piece in it.
This is one that I'd like to ask Senator King, but if others of you would like to chime in, that'd be great too. It didn't sound like we saw a huge outpouring of Democratic interest in the proposal that you came out with over the weekend. And so I'm wondering, well, what do you think the prospects are? And is this all just a matter of electing to pass a tax bill just before an election?
Well, I think there's that possibility that there's concern about that vote on raising taxes. I mean, that's been one of the concerns all along. And I think as you get closer to getting out of here, I think that concern, kind of elevates itself. I think your analysis wasn't a lot of support. Even would tell you that it didn't seem like we made what we thought were substantial changes and movements from what we rolled out on the 13th of February to what we have shown in the 3 bills that we've dropped. You can see the movements that we made. If you analyze those, we think those were substantial movements. The response we got didn't appear that they thought they were substantial movements.
The other thing too I'd like to comment on is that with all the shots that are taken against the press on what you guys do or don't do, you guys have done a pretty effective job at educating the general public as to what some of the challenges have been with respect to transportation. We know because we're hearing it. They're quoting your press reports, whether it be TV or print or whatever, or blogs. We're hearing it. It's being forwarded to us. They're cut and pasting the articles that you all have been, talking about with respect to transportation. And so I think that not just in the Republican caucuses, but also many of our colleagues on the Democrat side are getting a lot of the same frustration from the citizens out there with respect to transportation. I think that has had probably a bigger impact than we know. On both sides of the aisle, in both chambers. I also do believe, though, that one of the other things that has still is kind of that thing behind the scenes nobody wants to talk about is the carbon issue that the governor brought up. And so a lot of people that were supportive, they have really waned in their support since then, not knowing whether or not the governor is going to if he's really going to take executive action on that or not.
So, Senator King, what's the prognosis for a transportation package right now?
Well, we received a letter today that said they would possibly hear or would hear the three bills, have a hearing on them, but there was no reference as to having a hearing on the reforms. And we have been adamantly, I think, steadfast in that we got to have the reforms. And
They being the House.
the Senate, the Senate, yeah.
I think I'd expand on Leader Christensen's comments and Senator King's. The rosiest scenario on low carbon fuels, the increase is as much as a gas tax. That's the rosiest outlook. When you look at the policy centers comparisons, they are many, many times greater potential risk. And as I read the blog, I think in the Olympian, the governor is still very clear. He reserves the right to implement those by executive order. That doesn't build confidence in people that want to support a transportation package. If the best scenario is a bigger increase in fuel than the taxes with no corresponding benefits to the transportation system, why?
Well, maybe this is a good time to ask about the low carbon fuel standards thing too, because yesterday the governor's office released some information indicating that the same consultant that came up with the dollar figure is now claiming 6 to 8 cents. But it also sounds as though there are certain different assumptions.
Well, I think you can find the answer you want, but they obviously put out the best possible scenario, and that's just about equal to the gas tax, and it doesn't make 1 mile of road safer or reduce one gridlock point in this state. But if you go to the policy center, on the other hand, you see far worse scenarios coming from low carbon fuels. We have to have the trust of the public that's going to buy this fuel and the public that's going to be forced with a higher gas tax and other higher user fees. We have to restore the trust of the public, not make it worse.
Do you personally, Senator Schuster, do you personally support the transportation package that Senator King's laid out?
You know, I have supported Senator King in the process from day one.
So
Yeah.
you're one of the 13 votes.
With all the talk on the Democratic side about, we don't know who, if they got
You
the
know,
votes, et cetera,
let's
I
be,
just wondered if you
no,
personally.
I back my chairman. Unquestionable. But if you hand out the names, the special interests are going to go after pros or cons before they even see the final package. And anybody that doesn't believe that Senator King has the integrity to actually have those hard votes is in for a surprise. He has that integrity.
So let me, if I may, let me respond. It's interesting to me that when we initially started this conversation with the other side of the aisle, that they kept saying, well, you got to have 13 votes and we'll provide 12. That's how we're going to move this package forward. Go back and look at how many signatures were on the package that came out in 03 and how many signatures were on the package in 05, and look at the number of signatures that were on Senator Ides' bills when she dropped them. Her and Conway on one, and she was the only one on the other two. So all of a sudden, we're held to a higher standard. Not only have they gone from 13, as soon as we announced that we had 13, the next day it was, well, we want 14.
You're saying you had 14, right?
I didn't say I had 14. I said I had 13.
Okay, that's what I heard before, but then I saw some reports that indicated 14. So you're saying that you have at least 13.
I had at least 13.
Now, if you will,
Yeah,
now,
we haven't
here-
checked with our
here's-
caucus, so I'm not gonna,
Here's where we go back, Jordan. When the administration opens up once again with low carbon fuel standards, the confidence of people to support a package is not improved. It only makes it worse. When the governor talks about minimum wage through executive order, it hardly inspires confidence in the elected legislature that we're going to do the death penalty by executive order, banning it. We're going to do low carbon fuels by executive order, and we're going to do minimum wage by executive order as soon as we leave town. That doesn't put trust in the 49 senators and 98 elected House members. If you go back to the AP forum, all 4 of the transportation leads expressed great concern over low carbon fuels. Judy Cliburn and Tracy Ide were both right there with Ed Orcutt and Senator King in questioning that as part of making a deal.
I guess I'll ask you the same question I asked the Democrats, which is, it seems like these sort of preconditions, which in their case was that they know exactly who's going to support that, preconditions can kind of seem like excuses. So isn't that the same thing over here on the low carbon fuel side? Isn't this sort of a precondition that the governor's going to make this statement? Isn't that kind of an excuse not to pass this?
Well, I think if you're the person that pays the bill, you'd like a little more confidence. Those people that pay the bill in the real world need trust and confidence in their government. You look at that person that commutes a long distance to work. You look at that farmer. You look at that low-income family. They need trust and confidence in government that they're not going to get blindsided once we leave town.
You guys, Senator Sessler and Senator King, are you having second thoughts about having gone to this co-chair situation? Are you thinking of changing that after the session? Because clearly your frustration is, as the majority party, you can't get your own bills, a hearing on your own bills, which is kind of an odd thing probably for the public to understand, is why can't the majority have hearings some way or bring them to the floor on these issues you say are critical?
Well, I think that we still like having a different way of doing business than the other Washington. I don't think you're going to see Harry Reid give anybody from across the aisle any chairmanship. And we're trying to and would like to continue to try operating different than the other Washington. Sure, we're frustrated, but frustration runs all across. Executive orders in 3 different areas fit that criteria too.
So let me, if I may respond, Senator and I believe, have worked well together. I think we're still working well together. There are items that we don't agree on. There were items last year we didn't agree on, but we worked our way through them. This is what having co-chairmanships are all about. It's not all your way. It's not all their way. And you work through these issues, and that's what we're trying to do.
And I would submit to you that even in our Ways and Means with Senator Hill and Senator Hargrove working together, them working so closely resulted in this supermajority vote for the supplemental budget. And if you'll recall, at the beginning of session, we weren't even sure if we were going to have a supplemental budget. So I think that there's a lot of value in distancing ourselves from the other Washington by maintaining this and remaining committed to working together to come up with the best possible solutions for the people of our state.
Well, and I think if I may too, I think we proved that this group of folks here is willing to work with the other side last year, especially when it came to a operating budget that was the largest yes vote we'd seen in more than a quarter century. And that was because we were given the opportunity to work together. Now, if we're going back to some of the questions on transportation and things like that, if things have to be predicated upon, a guarantee from somebody, we don't have control over what the governor's going to do. The governor is the only person who can say, I want a transportation budget, and because I want a transportation budget, I will set aside my executive authority on this issue over here if that's what it's going to take. The governor has said completely the opposite. I will not set that aside, which then puts us in an awkward position as legislators who are elected by the citizens to put something together here to deal with these challenges. And if he truly wants us to work in a unilateral ability here to get this job done, he's going to have to provide us with a little bit of stability in this situation as well. You can't just take and pile it all on the legislature here, because when we're talking about what he has the capacity to do is several times, even if you grade on a curve from the low end to the high end out there, put it on a curve, let's just take the midpoint. We're looking at least 5 to 6 times what a gas tax is going to be. And if we are having a very difficult time dealing with a dime to 12 cents down here because of our constituents, for Pete's sake, folks, we're hearing from our constituents and their concerns of several times that impact on them. That's real money to them. It's real money not only out of the pockets of our constituents and citizens in the state trying to get from point A to point B, but it also is going to have a tremendous impact on our economy in general. And that's one of the things that we're responsible for, as well as looking out forward with the 4-year, balanced budget that we are trying to have here. These are the types of things we have to look at. We have to look at how are those things going to affect the shipping industry? How are those things going to affect the economy in manufacturing and those types of things? We can't just say, because it feels good to us, we're going to do it. We're trying to look out to make sure that we're sustaining, we're making decisions that are sustainable. And that's the argument we're dealing with internally. But when we've got that looming over our heads and a governor that's not willing to say, I agree, I'm going to set that aside, let's move forward in a sustainable ability, that's what's not happening here. And so I think that's where you're seeing the huge challenge we have in the 4 caucuses, not just the 2, but the 4 caucuses.
Senator Chancellor, if after November your caucus has 25 Republicans in it, do you still foresee a scenario in which there'll be Democratic co-chairs?
You know, I think that's what caucus reorganizations are all about. For me to say 25 fellow Republicans are going to do anything is hard to predict. But I think there's a lot that we've learned about working together with the other side. You know, the Hargrove Hill thing has worked really well. Senator Hatfield's worked well with us. I mean, we've shown that we can do a lot of things together. It'd be nice if Speaker Chubb offered a similar commitment to the House.
Okay. Senator King, I just wanted to ask a couple more things on low carbon fuel standards, and I know that this is boring to everybody, so I'll just ask one.
No, it's never boring.
Right. Okay, well, first off, I'm wondering, why did you think it was important to include a proviso in your transportation bill that essentially declared the legislature's intent to not allow low carbon fuel standards? What is the effect of that? And also, have you had a chance to take a look at the odd assumptions in the governor's consultant's report?
The reason it's in there is just because it's hanging over everybody's head. And if you don't address it, it's going to just continue to hang there. The point is, this is how my caucus feels. And if you want to get a package out of here, we have to address that issue. And if we don't, then I don't know where I'm going to be with the rest of my caucus. Because it's like, well, why should I take a vote that will increase gas taxes 11.5 cents? And in 3 months from now, the governor's going to institute his low carbon fuel standards that either immediately or over a longer period of time is going to increase gas taxes anywhere from 40 cents to $1.18. Depends on, it depends on the day, the time, and how he implements it. We don't know any of that. And so it's an unknown, and when you have an unknown, everybody thinks the worst. If you're going to do it, let's do it. Do it while we're here. Show us what you want to do and why you want to do it and how it's going to be implemented. Then we can have a good discussion about how do we move forward.
Does this have the legal effect of blocking an executive order?
Well, I doubt it. I mean, if you really want to look at it, it's in a section all by itself. If the bill gets to his desk, he'll just veto it. But the statement's been made. That was the point.
If Inslee agreed and just said, okay, I want to do it, how does that change things?
Well,
Would it change your caucus's position on?
I think it would make several members of my caucus feel much more comfortable in voting for 11.5 cent gas tax.
Would it change anything just in terms of the ongoing disputes over sales tax, MACA?
No, I don't think so. They're separate issues.
Finally, have you looked at the new consultant's report?
I'm sorry?
Have you looked at the new consultant's report?
I read it briefly, and I'm not totally knowledgeable on all of that stuff. But one of the explanations was, well, he's looking back in the past, and what you need to do is look forward, and how it's implemented, how quickly it's implemented, and all of those impacts. We don't know any of that until he comes forth and says, here's what I'm going to do. And that's what we've been asking him to do. But, he keeps saying, well, I don't have a plan. But when you look at, he signed a compact, British Columbia, California, and Oregon, and Washington. And now you look at British Columbia, California, and Oregon all have low carbon fuel standards. What does that imply? Washington's going to be there because we said we were going to do it. Well, if you're going to do it, let's get it out on the table so everybody can analyze it and see what the effects are.
Senator Chesler, the House passed the budget yesterday, and it's strike around your guys' budget, included a COLA in the budget. What's the next step for your caucus?
They haven't, here it's real simple, Jerry. They haven't passed the means to pay for it. You know, if you're going to have a,
I guess, I mean, when we're having a budget, it's gonna come over to you, do you guys go to conference?
sure, it's going to be, you know, there's going to be some sort of a conference to work things out, but they didn't pass the means to pay for it. And it's a hollow promise without the means to pay for it.
Okay, but they have a majority in that chamber. It's pretty much a sure thing they're going to pass it.
Well-
Well, John, you were at the Finance Committee executive action. It took them 2.5 hours to get those two bills out that they'd voted on before. And it took their leadership to come out and twist arms out of the Finance Committee. So I think they've got something to prove.
The budget included it in the base budget, and so they could take it out of reserves or pay for it somewhere. You could.
Well, no, it still has to be a four-year,
That
it
would
still has
blow
to be
the
a four-year
4-year.
balanced budget. You know, the amendment to the Senate budget sounded, you know, hey, we're going to put all this money into a COLA. It also amended the four-year balanced budget by doing it. So they're wanting to bust the four-year balanced budget more than anything in this world that I can see. And that is one of a kind in this nation to bring stability to spending habits and prioritization.
So is it dead in your mind for this?
I think it's very doubtful that the means can be found to pay for it.
Yeah. What do you guys think about taxing e-cigarettes?
Well, you've seen the hearing. That is the most unpopular thing I've seen here in 4 years. And it's interesting to me that although it's a finance bill, it's now getting pitched by a few as some sort of a safety or health proposal. There's not a single piece of that bill that impacts health. It's just money. And I know of several no votes over there. They had a no vote in finance that was very articulate about why it's a bad bill. I think that's going to be a tough one for them to get out.
Eric, I can tell you in my recent history, since members have had email as their primary means of communication, I have never seen one subject that had more originally thought out letters than e-cigarettes. In the days of listserv and spam, the dozens, hundreds of emails I get from around the state are all original thoughts and original comments. They're not canned comments like the other groups send. These are heartfelt people out there talking about themselves or family members that got off of cigarettes by this product. They talk about the unfairness of the taxation. They talk about how it's less offensive. These are long, articulately written pieces that come to me, and if they're coming to me, I'm sure every other member is experiencing that.
So do you
How would you
think-
address the $1.5 billion balloon payment from Hell next biennium on McCleary?
Well, e-cigarettes isn't going to do it. We're off by a few digits.
Somehow, and it's not like one magic bullet. It's sort of a, a little bit here, a little bit there, but
Do you know what those bullets are, John? Do you know what those little bits here and there will be? If you know, share it with us.
You know what they are?
No, I was
Sure,
asking,
Tom.
you said you know it, so I thought maybe you're going to share them with us.
No, but
Oh, okay.
what I'm coming from is I see a side that's facing a $1.5 billion balloon payment from Hell next year, and I don't see any plan on how to address it.
See that we have a committee that's been appointed by the Four Corners to meet on this and look for solutions. And I think there's a lot of technical things that go into this. We don't have a crystal ball, but we know that the way you don't get there is the governor's budget. 17% of the governor's budget went to education spending. That doesn't get you there very fast. Our supplemental budget in the Senate directed over 70% into education. Now, you can take our course to get there, or you can take the governor's, but we're going to get there faster, and his is going to require a lot more taxes than ours ever will.
Do you think that there's no room for any taxes on e-cigarettes and vapes, or are you just opposed to it started at 95%, it was amended down to I think 75%?
Well, I'll give you my perspective, and the House who's actually hearing it can give you theirs. But I think what we need is a broader regional, national discussion of where this policy fits. Is it a smoking cessation device? Is it less harmful? Is it a volume-priced product versus a flat tax? It's a broad-based issue that I think we should be having at least a regional and possibly a national discussion about where does this device really fit, because I don't think anybody knows for sure.
Well, especially since the federal government hasn't even decided. You know, that's the issue we're dealing with on this.
Ross Hunter yesterday was saying, hey, this was an anti-Hill bill to begin with, so therefore this has bipartisan support. It sounds like you guys are saying, not necessarily.
I don't think it had a hearing.
No, it's not in the budget. I talked to Andy, it's not the least bit necessary for that side. And, I think that it's a little bit of a red herring to call this tobacco. We've got other tobacco-like products, snuff, et cetera. Those are really tobacco. This isn't. And when you listen to that hearing, and I'd encourage you to go back, there are people who believe that their lives have been changed in a positive way by having this much less harmful alternative.
Is it still a priority for your,
One more question, we need to caucus at 12:30, so one more question.
is it still a priority for your caucus to get a veteran resident tuition bill through? Because both of those bills have gotten stuck in committees from both chambers. Is that still something that's?
I hope it's a priority of all the legislature and the governor.
Well, what do you propose at this point to get one through? Because they're both, is there?
I'm going to be talking with the speaker actually about the version that's in the House. Senator Bailey's got her version over here. It's passed out. It's a great piece of legislation. It's supported by everybody who's out there. It's the one that really went through the full process, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to get that piece of legislation out of the House. It's a good piece of legislation.